Wow! Wow! I can't believe that was made in the 90s. That animation is really... Those character designs are just so offensive. And it's not as if anime wasn't that well known. Okay, it wasn't a massive deal because we were well off Adult Swim getting really popular and Pokemon becoming the biggest thing in the world. In fact, Pokemon wasn't even a thing when this cartoon was really out. It wasn't really Pokemon. It at least hadn't made its way to the West. But just checking because I accidentally made it. I accidentally had another go at this a while back, and then I realised that I had forgotten to turn the microphone on. So this is actually my second attempt at doing the vlog. So I just watched it. It follows on directly from Cigars of the Pharaohs. You got Tintin still in India, staying with the Maharaja. Guy comes in, says he's a messenger from someone in China. He gets hit with Rajar juice, but then he gets hit with Rajar juice, and all hell breaks loose. And then so he gets hit by Rajar juice. He's poisoned. The only things he gets out are Mitsuhirato, Shanghai, and he's off to Shanghai to deal with this, and the plot kind of goes from there. Now, before I go into the entire plot and spoil the hell out of this, I will say I actually think this is a pretty good episode, although it's a bit difficult to watch with all the offensive storylines. But if anyone, and I'm amazed it actually got made considering the references to the kind of Nanking references there. Now, the graphic novel was actually made in published in 1936, and the Nanking atrocities did not happen until a year later, which is, wow, that is a hell of a coincidence. But again, there's always been that thing between Japan and China. There's always been that animosity, and it's very rightfully so. There's been horrible actions taking place. But back to the Tintin. It doesn't really. It just doesn't really entirely work. It works for the most part. This is probably the best episode yet. It has the best running plot. So of all the episodes so far, that it had the best running plot, and it remembered to give Tintin a friend to interact with, which I'll get into detail with in a bit. But anyway, Tintin goes to Shanghai. He meets Mitsuhirato. Mitsuhirato is acts like he's the good guy. He acts like he's although he's obviously a villain. Tintin someone then intends to shoot Tintin. He meets he's been warned that the Maharaja is in serious trouble. He doesn't say what. We don't quite know what, and thinks he might have to go back. But then someone slips him a message saying, "Meet me here tonight." It's the guy who tried to save him from being shot, except now he wants to chop off his head. So, what the hell's happening? So that leads Tintin to think, maybe I should go back. He gets on a boat to go back to India until someone hits him with chloroform. Cue that clip of Nash saying, "Does this smell like chloroform to you?" And him and Snowy are brought to the mountains of China, where they meet a guy called Wang, who's someone who's trying to stop the drugs trade in China. He goes to Blue Lotus. The titular Blue Lotus in this is actually an opium den, though they make a lot less references to it being an opium den in this one. It's not. It's rather underplayed because again, this came out in the 90s. It wasn't really that acceptable, although considering some of the way these characters are drawn in this, like they draw the Japanese guys with really offensive buck teeth. Like, oh my god, I can't believe this came out in the mid 90s. Like, this was the height of PC. Now I know why they did it. I mean, we'll go into detail about why. I'll go into detail a bit why this episode had to get made. It wasn't just to do with Cigars of the Pharaohs and finishing off that storyline, because there was a few offensive things in that one that they could have easily cut. But this actually not. But so it comes back to China, goes into Shanghai pretending to be a Japanese a Japanese officer, because the Japanese Mitsuhirato has blown up a train track claiming that bandits have done it to force a Japanese occupation of Shanghai to establish order. Again, wow. I know that the whole of the source material, but you wouldn't have thought it goes so much about this whole, considering the history, you would have thought that Anchor Bay would not want this coming out, but Tintin then deals with they go with all that, get out of Shanghai to meet Professor Fang, who's supposedly going to have a cure for the Rajaja juice. He's supposedly been working on one, and they really need, because Wang's son Didi, who's the guy who tried to chop off Tintin's head, is getting worse and worse, so they obviously need to sort that now. The problem is that Fang's now been kidnapped, as everyone who's actually important in a Tintin story is. Tintin gets captured, no, wait, that's well down the line. So it's just that seems to happen a whole lot. So it's kind of this default measure. Yeah, this guy gets kidnapped more times than Princess Peach. But other than that, I really can't. So other than that, I can't really think of much about that. He goes on this train. Massive war sweats away, and he meets a kid called Chang, who was in the river, and his orphanage was supposedly destroyed in this storm. And they suddenly become best friends for no real reason. But again, this was the one time they understood that Tintin needs a companion, someone to play off who actually has a personality. And I mean, Chang doesn't have that much of a personality, but he's at least kind of decent, and he's the major reason why, because he turns up again in a later story that I think they'd want to tell. So yeah, so obviously they had to prepare for the. So obviously they had to get, if they wanted to do Tintin in Tibet, they would have had to have done this one, which again, considering the way people are introduced in this show, I'm not entirely surprised, but so we're now at this situation. The assassination turns on Tintin. He realises he's got to go back to the Blue Lotus because Wang's possibly been captured, and that's probably where Professor Fang is. Then they get back, they deal with the drug smuggling. He finds out the information about the drug smuggling operation. Tries to intercept it, but gets caught. They're brought back to the Blue Lotus again. Wang and his wife are there, and they're going to use Didi to chop off their heads. But then Rastapopoulos comes in. Now Rastapopoulos is the movie producer from the first film, from Cigars of the Pharaohs. He gets introduced in Cigars of the Pharaohs, and he turns up, and then suddenly turns up. I mean, he's actually referenced earlier on as in the episode, because Fang is attending something that that's being run by him, and that's where he disappears, which really signposts what the result of this whole thing's going to be. And after that, we get the big reveal. He reveals the Pharaoh's emblem on the cigars that was in all the lids. That was on all cigars that were being used for the smuggling operation in the last episode, which again I forgot to mention rather idiotically. And the thing is, it's really signposted that it's him. They don't even bother to change the voice actor in the first episode when they're trying to cover it up. And in this episode, this episode kind of seals it. I mean, it's just they play Rastapopoulos as the obvious villain. In the graphic novel, he's actually they still kind of go. It's kind of a bit of a last minute reveal that he's actually a villain. In fact, Tintin doesn't go. They kind of change up the things. Tintin actually meets Rastapopoulos, and that's where he finds out that Fang's been kidnapped. Fang's meeting him, and he gets kidnapped there. And it was an idea which actually meant that it was a decent twist. Whereas in this instance, they don't really give it as much of a twist. It's not a twist that Rastapopoulos is the bad guy. And this is the big bad guy. He turns up in more... He faces Tintin more times than the other. He's treated as the big Tintin villain. And the Thompsons are brought back in briefly. Try and... they're briefly brought back in to get Tintin on Mitsuhirato's orders. And that goes absolutely nowhere. It's basically a mini... It's not even a mini version of what happened in Cigars of the Pharaohs. It's just... That's why... It's just... That is... They just sort of try to arrest him. It doesn't work because Chang swaps out a letter saying... Chang swaps out a letter for a hilarious letter. And actually leads to a really funny moment in the whole thing. There's actually a couple of genuinely funny moments in this episode that are really worth it. It all ends with Rastapopoulos gets taken down, Chang gets adopted by the Wangs, and Tintin goes back to Europe. Now the big difference is Mitsuhirato gets arrested in the cartoon. In the cartoon, in the comic, he commits harakiri. He actually kills himself in the graphic novel. What? And I have no surprise there of why they changed that one up. So that's the only other major change. I think this episode has a few good points, but wow, it's not really that politically correct by today's standards. So your enjoyment's really good, depends on whether you can get over that or not. I can imagine a lot of people won't. This whole thing was... But you got to remember, it's the context of the time. It's a lot of people... It's that whole thing of... People say that you shouldn't... There should be warnings and things on To Kill a Mockingbird. All that. Yes, the language is horribly offensive and the content... But again, it's in the context of the time and... It's in the context of the time. That's the point. That was what it was like back then. And if you can't understand that, then I'd have to say, grow up. You're not 5 years old. Yeah, we don't accept it now, but that's not a reason to rewrite history. Which is one of the reasons I'm kind of glad they didn't choose me. I mean, they obviously had no... There's a couple of things they obviously had to change. Like again. The drawings and the talk about black people in this is not very good at all, and I'll get more into detail about that with the plot, the changes in the plot in the Red Sea Sharks, which incidentally is one of my favourite Tintin episodes. But again, I'm actually kind of glad they made the change from the graphic novel. The changes made from the graphic, some of the changes from the graphic novel, especially the big one, I'm glad they made the change. Other than that, there's just a few sequences, a few little bits and bobs that didn't make the cut. Animation's pretty much the same as ever. I've never talked about the theme song though. Tintin has got to have one of the best theme songs of any animated 90s shows. I hate the fact that we see tons of these best theme songs of TV shows and best songs of animated shows in the 90s, and Tintin never shows up on one, despite the fact it's very much in the vein of a John Williams type score. It's very much like Indiana Jones. It's actually very similar to Indiana Jones, which again is rather ironic considering that the history between Spielberg and this franchise. But yeah. There's not very much to say about this episode. Again, through my details, I think this is one of the better ones. This is kind of the best one to date. This is the best one of the ones I've watched so far, but I know they get better after this. There's not really anywhere else to really go with this episode. It's very fine. I liked the introduction. Chang's a decent character introduced. He's the only character introduced in this episode, apart from Rasputin was introduced in the last episode. So I'm saying he's the only character that's introduced in this episode that actually turns up again in future episodes. And even then, he only turns up in one, and it's pretty. It's a decent. And again, I'll get into my thoughts on that when I eventually get around to doing Tintin in Tibet, which will be quite a while now, because we're only on the 3rd episode. Luckily these two, I believe these two are in the correct order if you're watching it on Netflix or if you watched it on its original broadcast, which is a good deal, because I can imagine there being a lot of confusion with this, and I think this one's pretty damn good. One of the things I will say that the cartoon improves from, on all the episodes so far, the one thing the cartoon improves on over the graphic novels is it knows how to do the shades of the environment. It knows how to do afternoon settings, it knows how to do, it can do there's a lot of environments where it knows to make it darker. It knows to make the catacombs in the tomb of the pharaoh in the last episode a lot better, and it knows how to shoot. I think the graphic novels are a little too bright at this point. I don't think Hergé quite got his art style down. Also, Tintin appears a lot younger in the graphic novels than he does in the animated show. I think the animated show they wanted to make him look a little bit older than he was, and more reflect the way he looked in later graphic novels, which again would be understandable considering how it turns out. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Cigars of the Pharaohs. I think it's pretty good, actually. I think no, that's not my fault. That's my fault to Blue Lotus. That's the last vlog I did. Good for you. Good news, I'm an idiot, and I'm very professional. It's just, I think in terms of the context, it's just an okay episode, because I don't think they get great for ages. I don't think it gets great till Haddock's introduced. Voice actors are all pretty good, although the voice actors, though, however, this is my big weak point with this episode. The voice actors are clearly a lot of them are clearly white people doing rather offensive accents. It's not brilliant. But again, the time of the 90s is kind of, again, culture of the 90s. There's not really much more to that. It's a decent episode. I'd say check this one out, but only if you saw Scars of the Pharaohs. If you skip Scars of the Pharaohs, you're all well and good. I think you could actually skip the first 3 episodes. I'm not sure you could skip. The only reason that's the only reason I would say you don't skip the Blue Lotus. It gives you context, some context for Tintin in Tibet, which is actually a very good episode. Whereas I think other than that, Blue Lotus is kind of skippable, same as Cigars of the Pharaohs, but it's a lot less skippable than Cigars of the Pharaohs, and especially Tintin in America. Very good. And the other thing I need to talk about is the box set. One thing I've not been mentioning is that they split the episodes into part 1, part 2, like they were on the original broadcast. But the problem is, they play them as one episode, so as a result, it's very difficult to skip it because they divide into 4 chapters. So which means it's really hard to get. If you want to fast forward through the title sequence, if you don't want to watch it twice, it's really difficult. And I've had to go a bit back and forth between them, so it can be a bit difficult on that basis. So that's just the reason why I'd say watch it on Netflix. But if you're gonna watch it on Netflix, by all means watch it on Netflix because it's quite easy to navigate. But watch them in the order that these vlogs are being done in, and watch them in the order, which is the order that's on the box set and the order the graphic novels were set in. Yeah, Blue Lotus is a pretty good episode. I think I'm going to move on to the next one. I think that's The Broken Ears, the next episode.